Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regularly scheduled Ethics Commission meeting for April 25th, 2016. And I will call the roll. Commissioner Andrews? Here. Commissioner Keene? Here. Commissioner Hand has been excused, and I would like to take this opportunity to introduce and welcome our newest commissioner, Dana Chow, who is going to, I am absolutely certain, be a very worthy successor to Commissioner Herr, and we look forward to working with her. She's an attorney, was in the General Counsel's office at McKesson, presently not working at the moment, I understand, other than her family duties. And so I told her, well, that means we've got someone who can spend a lot of time on Ethics Commission matters. But we're delighted to have her here, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
All right. Turning to item number 2 on the agenda, which is public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Have any comment?
Commissioners Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. As previously stated, I'm filing the first of a series of complaints directly with this Ethics Commission. As in November, I went to the Ethics Commission and talked to 2 of your investigators, both of whom actively discouraged me from filing complaints by telling me that there weren't any basis for these complaints. This is before they even looked into them. The first complaint I have is against Supervisor Mark Farrell and is based on 2 orders of determination from the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. Each order involves a lawful request for public records to which the supervisor and or his staff failed to respond in lawful manner. Supervisor Farrell had an obligation in both the Sunshine Ordinance and the California Public Records Act to respond in accordance with the requirements of those laws. The facts will establish that Supervisor Farrell's office failed to respond to the request for records, to the Sunshine complaint, or to appear or send anyone to appear before the Sunshine Task Force for the hearing. I believe the facts will show his behavior to be both knowing and willful, and as such, support a finding of violation of Sunshine Ordinance Section 6734, willful failure shall be official misconduct. I submit they also support violations of the California Public Records Act. What's really convenient about this is that the City Attorney's Office sent a nice long memo, and in there, at the very beginning of it, they use your very definition of what willful is, and it basically says, where was it now? Willful failure is a failure to discharge the duties imposed by the Sunshine Ordinance. And then it goes on and gives further on. So we have the city attorney even saying that what Mr. Farrell did was unlawful. Bottom line is, the Sunshine Ordinance and the California Public Records Act and the Brown Act are treated by many bodies in the city as if they're some sort of a joke. And just prior to this meeting, there was the Small Business Administration, and they were going through their agenda. There were no agendas available for the public on the table, and they were going through the entire agenda item by item without asking for public comment. So I waited till the end of their meeting and told them, I said, you know, the Sunshine Ordinance says you're required on each agenda item to ask for public comment, and they treated it like it was a joke. I had to drag this Ethics Commission and 5 other groups before the Sunshine Task Force before I finally got my 150-word summaries placed in the minutes where they belong under the Sunshine Ordinance. And during that entire time, this body and other bodies were basically violating my First Amendment rights. If they can't shut you up, they try to shut you down. I went to the police commission the other day and they accused me of violating the policy on harassment for the mayor. Of course, I didn't. I used an expression they didn't like.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name is Helen Greco. I'm with California Common Cause. Common Cause has requested your support on SB 1107. Should you have any questions or would like any comments, I'm available. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other?
There's not things on the list like building and construction. this is one of the requirements that keep the supervisors and the workers, keep working. And I've been going down there to the cap building contracting, and I've been missing out because the contrariety that he put in my mind had blanked it all out. So I learned to be stronger and make sure that it won't happen again. I've been over and over and over on this. So I think that he better come to realize I'm going to have to go on the dawn one.
Thank you.
Good evening. David Pilpel speaking as an individual. I'm sorry I'm a couple of minutes late. I hope to hear more about the new commissioner. But I just wanted to take a moment to call attention to a longtime city employee who I understand is not well. Carla Johnson, who's most recently been the director of the mayor's office on disability, and before that spent many years at the Department of Building Inspection, apparently is very ill. And she absolutely reflects all the good things that we want in city employees: honesty, integrity, thoughtfulness, caring. And my thoughts are with her, and I wish her the best and hope that she can pull through this most difficult time for her. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. Welcome to the new commissioner. I'm Elena Schmidt. I'm with Friends of Ethics. Just a quick comment, which is on something that is not on the agenda, which is you have a very nice handout on what you voted on last week or last month on the whistleblower, but it would be helpful to us to know what's going to happen at the Board of Supervisors and who's going to carry it and when hearings are and that kind of thing. So if we can get some public information on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Before I get started, can we make sure the overhead projector is working? Great. Okay. Hello, my name is Michael Petrellis, and I'm here representing Government Access Project. I want to show this item on the overhead. You'll see that this was a meeting in October at the mayor's office of the mayor. It's a sign-in sheet for an October 1, 2015 meeting. The list of attendees, if you could zoom in a bit here where my finger is, please, you'll see that the name is Willie Brown. He printed his name, and then in the slot for organization, thank you very much. There's Willie Brown's name. This is the slot for the organization he was representing. Okay, if you could come back to me, please, I'd appreciate it. I filed a complaint with the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force regarding Willie Brown not signing in as he was supposed to, as all other members of the entourage at that meeting signed in. My complaint was filed with the Ethics Commission on Thursday, February 25th. That was 2 months ago. I have since then received a confirmation notice from Catherine Argumedo saying that this matter is currently under review by commission staff. Today I emailed her for an update. She got back to me and said it is still being reviewed. Do you guys want to get serious about handling complaints from the public when we see a potential ethics violation going on at the mayor's office, when Willie Brown is leaving it blank who he's representing at this meeting, where everyone else was pretty much from East-West Bank? Why is it 2 months later, the only responses I have received from the Ethics Commission saying the matter is under review? I really don't want to file complaints and then have it go nowhere, or to have you come back and say, oh, we have to protect the privacy of the individuals involved. Well, the individuals involved may be making big ethics violations. I'm here today to say to you, get on it. when we file complaints, get to investigating them. Don't make a member of the public wait 2 months for some sort of action. If you're not going to move on it, let me know. If you are going to move on it already. 2 months is intolerable. I presented you with the evidence. The Ethics Commission has not moved on it. I'm saying to everyone who's watching this, before you file a complaint, think that it will go nowhere. You guys have to address this issue of waiting too long to look at these matters.
Thank you.
I'm Bob Planthold. For the benefit of the new commissioner, I'm a former ethics commissioner and a veteran of several grand juries as part of my good government experience. I don't know that I'm going to last through the meeting just because you've got multiple detailed issues to deal with. So I wanted to talk now about item 6. I wanted to encourage you to continue your attempts at enforcement and collection regarding Supervisor Farrell. Please do not back down. Please don't accept anything other than following this to the end. We don't know exactly what may have transpired that could generate this coming up as agenda and therefore possible closed session. So, again, not all of us are going to last to the end. Please don't give in. Don't quibble. Just stay the course, to use a trite, overworked phrase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm Charlie Marsteller. For the record, I'm with Friends of Ethics. I welcome the new Commissioner. I wanted to say I would not normally be saying anything at this time, but I noticed that this East-West Bank matter was raised. The predecessor bank for them was closed by the federal government and reopened the next Monday. So there's a history with that item that the Commission should be looking at as well. I don't know what that was all about, but it's a bit of a hot potato, I would imagine.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, let's turn to item number 3, is the presentation and discussion of staff report on public financing in the 2015 city elections.
Hello.
Pelham?
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. So, as you know, there is a staff report on the public financing program. I'm just going to take a few minutes to briefly describe the program and provide some highlights as it was administered in 2015. San Francisco's public financing program is a voluntary program that provides a neutral source of funding for candidates based on the amount of private contributions raised by the candidates. The program was approved by voters in November 2000. And the purpose of the program, so some of the intentions of the program was to allow candidates to spend less time fundraising and more time communicating with the voters on important issues. In addition, it intended to create an incentive to limit spending and thereby also reducing the pressure on candidates to raise large amounts. It also intended to reduce the advantage of incumbents and to increase competition in races. The public financing program was first implemented in the November 2002 election. In that election, there were a number of Board of Supervisors races. Sometime later, it was extended to the mayor's race. Over the years, significant changes have been made to the program. For example, the qualification thresholds have changed. The time at which public funds are first dispersed, that's changed. Nomination deadlines have changed. The amount of the expenditure ceiling cap has changed. So there have been some changes over the years, and therefore those changes make it difficult to compare the program across elections. Anyways, under the current program, and as it was implemented in 2015, a candidate has to show that he or she is eligible to receive public financing. And one of the criteria is that they have to show that they've raised at least $10,000 in qualifying contributions from at least 100 residents who live in the city. The threshold is slightly higher for incumbent candidates, which is $15,000 from 150 residents. In addition, a candidate who receives public funding has to agree to limit spending to $250,000. The spending cap may be lifted by the Ethics Commission in increments of $10,000, and that's based on third-party spending as well as the participating candidates' opponents' fundraising and third-party spending to support the opponent. So it's a pretty complicated scheme. I'll get to the details later, but in the November 2015 election, there were only 2 races in which public financing applied. One was the mayor's race, in which no candidate sought public financing. The other race was a District 3 race. There were 3 candidates on the ballot. One of the candidates did not raise or spend $1,000 or more, so the report doesn't discuss her activity. The other 2 candidates sought public financing and received public financing. And they both received the maximum amount, which is up to $155,000. And the amount of public funds that these 2 candidates received represented about 30% of the total funds available to these candidates. And by total funds, I mean private contributions they raised as well as public funds that they received. And while each of these candidates' expenditure ceilings started at $250,000. Their final expenditure ceiling, which was raised throughout the election by the Ethics Commission, ended up at, I believe it was $920,000 for one candidate and $1 million for the other candidate. Their spending totaled about $480,000 for one candidate and $594 for the other. So in the aggregate, these 2 candidates' spending totaled about $1 million. And what was interesting is that the amount spent by third parties to support or oppose these candidates also totaled about $1 million. And in terms of historical context, the 2015 election was the only election in which you had only one Board of Supervisors race on the ballot. In prior elections, the participation rate in the program was never higher than 50%, because there were definitely more races on the ballot, and in some races you just didn't have any participating candidates. And based on data from the 2015 and prior elections, incumbents have generally won the election regardless of whether they were participating candidates. And another trend that we observed is that third-party spending, when it's viewed as a proportion of candidate spending, has increased over the years. Okay, here we go. Thanks.
Thank you, Shaista. Shaista Shaikh is our Assistant Deputy Executive Director and has had almost 18 years of experience here at the Commission, has worked on a lot of the previous public financing reports. This is something that's required to be submitted per our our campaign and governmental conduct code law, section 1.156. And so it's an opportunity to present to you, and then before we send it to the board, a snapshot of the prior year's election in terms of public financing and its effect. One of the things we wanted to do in this report at the end was, as Shaista indicated, was to look at some of the numbers from 2002 through 2015 and to see if that provided any insights about what the program might need to do in the future, what it might better do in the future. And so we provided just a little bit of data to help launch that conversation at the appropriate time. But one of the things that, as Shaista mentioned, we've seen increasing amount of in proportion of independent spending in city races. That's not a headline, I think, to anybody. But one of the things that we looked at and realized is that there are mechanisms that any public financing program has to try and make sure candidates participate. It is a voluntary system, as you know. People agree to limit their spending and a number of other requirements in order to receive the benefit of public financing in their campaigns. And so there's always a balance of looking for very, very rigorous rules while practical application of those rules that is strong as well, so that candidates want to participate. One of the things that we noticed when we looked at just last year's experience, even though it was one race, it illustrates some of the mechanics that might be worth taking another look at down the road. And that is that when the independent expenditures were so high in the race, based on the current mechanics, we raised the spending threshold that candidates otherwise agree to as a part of the law to the new level based on the independent expenditures that are in the race, either supporting their opponent or opposing them. And because of the current process, the mechanics required us to lift the spending limits 21 times for one candidate and 29 times for another candidate, all over the span of 11 weeks before the election. So I think it's something that we would love to elicit input from candidates, from treasurers, from donors, from the public, others who care deeply about our public financing system, to see if there might be some time that we need to update our rules or take a look at it to make sure that it's achieving the goals that it was intended to achieve and that the rules for participating are as clear and strong as possible. So we provided that information in this report. There is one note I would make, and we have an errata sheet on the table for the public as well. On chart 4 on page 8 of our report, that number in the 2015 column, the percentage of third-party spending as a percentage of candidate spending, it's not 65%. It's actually 96%. We had an error on the number that we used initially. So we will issue the report with the corrected number, but we provide both the corrected Chart 4 and the corrected table in Appendix 2 with that information. So this is really a report that we wanted to provide with a snapshot of last year's experience. Admittedly, it was one election, so we can't draw a lot of conclusions from it, but it certainly is part of a larger picture of a program that has changed some over time. So it's something that we wanted to provide for public discussion, for feedback, and then also to report it to the board as required per our government code section. Happy to take any questions or participate in any discussion that might be of use to you.
Commissioners have any questions?
Just an observation. Excellent report. Very well done.
Do you anticipate that in the coming election there will be many more candidates who will be eligible for public funding and who will be seeking it?
Yes, we do anticipate that more candidates will be seeking public funding. We are getting questions from candidates about how the program works and what they need to do in order to qualify. And the last day for them to actually submit an application for public financing happens at the end of August. I don't recall the exact date, but it's about August 28th or so. And the deadline for filing nomination papers for the Board of Supervisors occurs in mid-June. So there is still some time.
And the reports of the public financing, the reports of those committees are mandatory audits, right?
Yes.
Do you know where the audits are for the two for 2015?
For the two candidates who received public financing in 2015 are currently being audited. Their audits have commenced.
We have a date when we anticipate getting the report?
Yes, we anticipate by the end of this fiscal year those audits will be completed.
Will that be by the end of June?
Yes, and possibly sooner. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Very comprehensive. Thank you. Very, very comprehensive.
I appreciate the time that was spent in preparing this, and it is very helpful. And I don't think it requires any action by us, but are there any public comments on that report?
Charles Marsteller again. I was active with the process that put this on the ballot back in 2000. It was Prop O, and that was for public financing for supervisor. Subsequently, the board enacted public financing for the mayor's office about 5 years later or less. It's a great system. It's known nationally. This was an atypical year, this year past. This year coming should be very much more interesting, I think, and clearer as to its benefits. Fundamentally, from the public's perception, and I think from the candidate's perception as well, that we're establishing a platform for debate. We're not trying to level the playing fields. We're not in competition with the private sector on this and trying to keep up with the Joneses. But we do want a candidate's voice heard loud enough so that the public will understand what this person's message is, and that they have a good forum and a good funding mechanism to basically get their message out. To my surprise, I've learned that it can also serve as a check and balance on the political system. So, for instance, if a professional, say an engineer or someone, sees something wrong with the building code that he thinks makes the city seismically unsafe or whatever, that person can avail themselves of public financing and run to basically get their message out, which may otherwise be an impossible thing to do. So in that case, the public safety might be better afforded as a result of this program as well. So I did learn my own lesson that this is a check and balance on the political system, and it would fight corruption.
Thank you.
David Pilpel again, speaking as an individual. Great report. Scheist is to be appreciated for this. I think she really highlights at the end that there are questions that we should ask, and I noticed that this is on the policy agenda for discussion on the next item that we may talk about in the next few months, ways to change the program and make it continue to make it viable. I think what the staff has done over time to manage campaign filings is good, to audit campaigns, to run the public finance program. All of that is good. I think what we haven't really done well over time is look at ways to both reduce the cost of campaigning so that rather than raising and spending $1 million, that it's more like, less than that for a citywide race and even less for districts. But to really bear in mind that there is kind of a minimum amount or, I don't know, some level that you kind of need in order to communicate your message and run an effective campaign. And so you kind of need at least that amount. Beyond a certain amount, kind of higher than that, you're just spending money because you have money to spend. And, 17 door hangers and 57 mailings, at that point, you're really at diminishing marginal returns. So if there's a way to both reduce that cost and yet get more candidates up to that minimum threshold so that we have more competitive elections over time, I think that's to the good. And maybe in discussions about the program, we can get at some of those fundamentals that aren't just about campaign finance, but are really about running for election and having competitive elections in the city. I think kind of a good idea, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stella Johnson, and I was wondering, what happened to taxi services? What happened to, their, information? Is that because I got on the computer and the computer was bombed and I could not get nowhere with it because of fingerprint and being a zap? I mean, where are this discussion being going on? Where is this hidden message? And I'd like to know, why is everything so difficult? Like, everybody shut up. And did you like yourself to be like that? Did you try to explain something that is not real? I think you got to demand your rights and speak up. Because there is our world that we are trying to build. We can't build it with somebody trying to step away and make sure that we can't do that. That don't make no sense at all. Or any elected person. I mean, where the heck did I come from? Not music or what? I mean, to tell you, our love of our children and everything we have here. There's no discussion? Oh, come on. Get real. Because this is really getting to the point. And too many years of this stuff. It just ain't going to get the ball rolling. And everybody knows that don't even get business rolling.
Thank you.
Commissioners Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Well, my district was the district that had this election in it, Julie Christensen and Aaron Peskin. So it was my mailbox and my neighbors' mailboxes that were filled with all the CRAP that was used, the public money was used for. And I think it's kind of ludicrous when we know that Board of Supervisors elections are expensive to have a rule where they can say, oh, I promise not to spend more than $250,000 when they know darn well they're going to spend more than $250,000 and that you're going to raise the limit and they're just going to get the public money anyway. The whole purpose of this was to make it more competitive so that people who didn't have a big mechanism behind them had somewhat of a chance of getting their word out. And we're talking here about political free speech. So when you set up a dynamic where people can promise not to raise money, but then kind of ignore the promise, and you just then mea culpa, give them a blessing and just give them more money, it's kind of ludicrous. Not kind of ludicrous, it is ludicrous. And the fact that it's only one supervisory district is only the fact that that was the only one that was up for election. What's going to happen the next time? Are all the supervisors going to promise to spend $250,000 so they can get public financing, and then you're going to raise the limit and then let them have the money anyway? Certainly not a good place to spend my tax dollars as far as I'm concerned. And I know my neighbors were really, really aggravated about all the crap that was put into their mailboxes and hung on their doors, paid for by taxpayers, and paid for by people who promised not to spend more than $250,000 and then went ahead and did it anyway. I think, honestly, they knew darn well they were going to exceed that limit when they made the promise. And I have to ask, how honest is a human being if I say, I won't spend more than $250,000 so you'll give me this public money, and knowing that I will spend more than $250,000 and feeling no obligation at all to limit my expenditures, so that I did keep in not just with the letter of the law, but with the intent of the law. They knew what the intent was, and they just disregarded it. And basically, what's the purpose of having these rules if they aren't enforceable and you aren't going to enforce them? It's just like, hey, we had the same comment that was made earlier. If we give you complaints and you just sit on them, what good are you? And that's what you do. You sit on complaints, the public makes comments, and you sit there and don't respond. And the only time you respond, in fact, it's not really responses, it's reactions, is when someone like me gets up and tells you straightforward that you're being blatantly dishonest. And then you react and start, like they did the police commission the other day, accuse me of violating a policy which I hadn't. This makes no sense. Not to promise not to take the money and then take the money.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? All right, we'll turn to agenda item number 4, which is a discussion and possible action on proposed Ethics Commission policy agenda for July 1, 2016 through June 30th, 2017. And let me just say, sort of as an introduction, ever since Ms. Pallam became our executive director, she and I have been having conversations about the wisdom, possibly, of trying to, one, increase the number of personnel that we have who are dedicated to policy positions, and we'll talk about that when we get to the budget, but that because our proposed budget does provide for staff dedicated to policy, but we've also talked about we get piecemeal. We get suggestions from the public, and we get suggestions that we make about changes in the disclosure laws or in our campaign laws. And it seems to me that there is some wisdom of trying to sit down and look at the whole structure in San Francisco to see if there is a better way, a more effective way, a less complicated way to make our campaign laws more transparent, to get at the concerns that people have about pay for play, and corruption issues, gifts, things of that nature, and that I had suggested to Ms. Pelham that possibly one thing we might think about doing is convening a conference, whether we spend a day or whatever it is, with the Commission and sort of the experts in the field, both on the regulated side and those who are drafting regulations, to get input from experts in the field as to, having looked at what we presently have in our campaign laws and what we ideally might want to have, and come up with a package that isn't piecemeal but really deals sort of across the board with a lot of the issues that we hear about and we've been considering and that are some of them are on our list. So that's one of the things I want to throw out tonight, as to whether or not it would be worthwhile to convene a conference of experts in the field to assist us and come up with a sort of an overall plan rather than a piecemeal plan. But with that statement, I'll let Leanne go into more detail on what your concerns are.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chair Rennie. This item is attempting to build on some of that discussion and the conversation that the Commission had last year, as I understand it, identifying some of the policy areas that you wanted to see on your agenda going forward. Those efforts were put on hold pending the conclusion of your executive director search and the filling of that position. And so having the first quarter now, in at least in my tenure past, I wanted to try and bring back for you a way of thinking about developing a policy agenda going forward. So just as a recap, for those who may be less familiar, perhaps listening to the Commission meeting this evening, the Charter provides in part that one of our duties under the Charter is, of course, to have the responsibility for the impartial and effective administration of the programs and laws within our jurisdiction. And part of that responsibility is to make sure that we make recommendations to the mayor and the board about, and potentially to the voters, about issues concerning campaign finance reform, and other ordinances related to government ethics and lobbying that we're charged with administering and enforcing. Commissioner Rennie mentioned that we have a budget request for some policy staff. This document stops short of putting together a work plan, because I think it will depend largely on what our resources look like for next fiscal year and going forward before we can really tell you what the sequencing and the time frame for those issues would look like. But it struck me that it might be useful to recap some of the larger questions as you think about what kind of policy issues going forward make sense to you, either ones that have a sense of urgency or that haven't been resolved but that perhaps need the Commission's attention. So there were, on page 2 of the memo, there are the topics that were discussed in 2015 on your list, including limits for candidate-controlled committees, reporting of bundled contributions, and so forth. In addition, we know from the staff as we sat down and talked about this that there are also needs in the next section updating the campaign finance reform ordinance regulations. We just in the last item heard the concept that maybe it would be worth assessing the public financing program to some extent to see if its policies and mechanics are having the impact that we desire it to meet the voters' desires for that program. What do we know about independent expenditures? Are our rules strong enough? Are there things that we don't currently know about the sources of independent expenditures that might be useful? And then also down the road a bit, looking back for a program review of the expenditure lobbyist program to make sure that we're living up to the voters' expectation for that program after it's had some time to be implemented and to be provide the kinds of disclosures that we anticipate. In looking forward to the kinds of questions that you might want to consider that would shape how you want to see issues coming forward, or the types of issues that you'd like to see coming forward, what are the most significant areas of policy that are overdue to be examined that perhaps you haven't looked at? This may be the list. There may be others that you've had some additional thought about over the intervening months since you looked at the list from last year. The public may have some additional input that may be different from that time as well. Are there policy gaps that we need to identify that are most in need of strengthening to make sure our rules are as strong and effective as they need to be going forward? And are there things that we haven't yet been doing to evaluate our programs programs in our laws that perhaps we should start doing. So that's something also contemplated in the budget request. This is to Commissioner Rennie's point as well about how do we take a look and in what ways might we start a more comprehensive review to see how all of the moving parts of our laws fit together. And how can we more broadly engage the public in that process? So it may be a policy summit that achieves that. That may be the start of a larger discussion. But I wanted to throw those topics and those questions out there for your consideration and for public feedback as you think about this. Separately, there are some time-sensitive issues as well. How would a policy agenda address those issues? No matter what issues we might plan for, there inevitably will be issues that come forward that have some time sensitivity. So the two examples that are of a more immediate nature. First is one of the requests that's in Attachment 1, which is a proposed ballot measure that was suggested or recommended by Represent Us and the Friends of Ethics. And in fairness to their request, as you read it, it's more than just a restriction on lobbyist contributions and bundling. It's a bit fuller than that, but this was my shorthand. So apologies if I short-circuited the full description. But it's there in full in Attachment 1. And so that's something that's before you with the time sensitivity of if the Commission believes it's warranted to put on the November ballot, what would it take to do that, and how would we support that? Also, you heard a representative from California Common Cause mention SB 1107. We recently were contacted by California Common Cause with a request to support that piece of legislation. It would, in essence, remove current limitations under state law for the use of public funds in local jurisdictions for public financing systems if they choose to do it.
But it would not cover San Francisco.
That's correct, and they can speak to that. But that's right. This would speak to other special districts, other jurisdictions that are not charter cities. But it would enable that consequence of public financing systems if those local jurisdictions chose to do so. So that's something that, of course, as any piece of state legislation may go, there's a much faster, perhaps, time frame to weighing in on those matters. And one of the questions I spoke about with our city attorney, Shen, was what is the city's current process for doing that? I understand that there is a state legislation committee that is made up of either the representatives of or the individuals themselves, the mayor's office, the city attorney, the board of supervisors, controller, assessor, and the treasurer, that meets and apparently conveys and develops the city's perspective on state legislation so that the city is speaking with one voice. We haven't had a chance to contact them about this, of course, pending any discussion you might have about the level of interest you have to weigh in on this issue or other issues like it that may come down the road. I looked in the commission bylaws, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure there was any language that spoke to how the commission wants to handle these kinds of issues should they come on our radar. So that's one of the other questions as we think about a policy agenda going forward. Are there mechanisms that we want to create internally that would provide greater flexibility for the commission to speak or encourage the appropriate bodies in the city on measures that may be of interest if you want to weigh in on them? So specifically, the recommendations from this report is really to launch the conversation about a policy agenda. First, we would recommend that if there are specific recommendations or information you would like, we would ask that you request us to provide our analysis and recommendations on the proposed ballot measure that you might want to consider at your May meeting. Secondly, on the issue about for taking a position on state legislative matters, that we seek additional information from the mayor's office and others about what the current process is so we can figure out where we might need to sync in with that, again, depending on your desire. And then thirdly, that if there any discussion and public comment tonight, if there's any specific policy discussion, policy direction or consensus that you want to give to the staff, we can take a look at putting together options for work plans depending on both scenarios, if we have more resources for policy staff next fiscal year, and if we don't, we could lay out what those topics are and what kind of sequencing there might be, and also how a conference or summit type of event might factor into that, if that's something that you're interested in having us start putting together as well. So that's really the launch pad for this discussion, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any commissioner have any comment or?
Mr. Chair, I agree with you that a conference that you suggest would be very desirable, very valuable, very helpful to us going forward on so many of these things. I also want to compliment Ms. Pelham and the staff for what she's laid out here in terms of a roadmap for the things that we should be addressing. They hit right on the high points of everything that's of urgency. The matters, the bullet points on page 2 in terms of the limits for candidate control committees, and a report of bundling contributions, and a number of other things. Those are some things that I was going to suggest at the end of the meeting that we actually take up next time, and I've got some specifics on it, at our May meeting to recommend measures to the Board of Supervisors for them to pass. I'm really extremely happy about the proposed ballot amendment that's been put forth. It's terrific. It is absolutely excellent in terms of the ballot amendment that is going to regulate bundling and all sorts of other types of lobbying abuses that are endemic in San Francisco. I think it's going to be incumbent upon us, Mr. Chair, at our next meeting, after we get the staff's input on this, which I'm sure is going to be favorable towards us going forward, or not, and certainly not suggest any problem for us going forward, that we go ahead and vote to put the measure on the ballot for November. It's a good follow-up to what we started last year when we put Prop C on relating to expenditure lobbyists. This now takes it even a step further in regard to so much of San Francisco corruption that we're hearing about constantly. That's just become a part of the pattern of the way of doing things in San Francisco city government in terms of pay for play and people calling the shots through money and getting whatever they want, and there being no accountability whatsoever. These particular measures, in particular the ones that have been put forth for the ballot initiative regulating bundling and other types of gift giving by lobbyists, that goes to the heart of so much. So I look forward to, at our next meeting, all of us voting to put that on the ballot and it going forward with the same kind of vigor that Prop C went forward the last time. This is a good example, probably the best example of this commission doing its job, because these measures in regard to making sure that there are not payoffs to the Board of Supervisors, there are not payoffs to the mayor, that there are not the kinds of things that drive city policy through money and lobbyists. The Board of Supervisors is simply never going to do this, because this takes away the trough that they're feeding, part of they're feeding from, along with other individuals. So the whole basis in the charter that gives us the power to go directly to the people with these measures, we're fulfilling it with this. And all of those years that we didn't fulfill it, we've come out of the wilderness, I think, finally, by doing things like this. So I'm very happy to see all of this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I ask the city attorney if, in order to proceed as Commissioner Keene has suggested, is it necessary for us to have some kind of a hearing to make findings as to whether or not this legislation is addressing a problem? As we did with Prop C, we had some testimony about the need for it. I mean, it may be obvious to us, but do the rules require us to set up some kind of a procedure of making findings and including those in any proposed legislation?
Sure. Consistent with past advice that my office has provided, certainly any time the Commission enters into an area of campaign finance regulation, we're getting into obviously core First Amendment issues. And as we've recommended with respect to proposals such as the limits on candidate-controlled ballot measure committee fundraising, certainly to support those proposals, it's always incumbent on the Commission to build a record, build a legislative record, build a factual underpinning for the need for the campaign finance regulation in question. Certainly, in looking through the proposal that the Commission is considering tonight, I think they'll represent us. Is that the right word? Represent us people have actually done a good job of doing a lot of that already. If you look at footnote 5 of that memo, they've actually done a very nice spreadsheet, I thought, of pulling together a lot of information about lobbyist contributions. So I think they've really put us on the right path there. I'm sure Leanne Pelham and her staff want to do more sort of factual development that would help support that proposal. But yeah, that is something we would generally recommend, but I think some of the work has already been done, so I think we can get there. One other thing that I want to mention, since I'm on the mic, is that in terms of putting something on the ballot for this November, I don't have the exact date, but I believe the Commission would need to approve it by its July meeting. So basically, we would have 3 months to put something on the November ballot. So it wouldn't necessarily need to be May, but it's coming up quick.
Right. Good. Thank you. Any other comments by any commissioner or questions? Mr. Cho?
Yes. Leanne, thank you for this very helpful summary for me, especially as this is my first meeting. And I'd like to echo the chair and say that an overarching view and a strategy with respect to the most critical policy issues facing the Commission, I think having a full and robust discussion about that so that we can thoughtfully look at these issues would be very helpful as we head into the new fiscal year and can help guide us as we undertake this work. And then the second question I had for you is with respect to the funding. I think we'll get to this during the budget discussions, but how dependent, or could you give us a sense of what you might be able to accomplish with the current staff versus if you had the additional resources that are requested in the upcoming budget?
Thank you for the question. It's as I sit here, it's a little bit hard to specifically quantify it. I would imagine if you take each of these issues, the first introductory memo, a meeting to have some public comment, and the third to wrap it up has been my experience, at least so far. So each of these could be over a course of 3 months. And right now, that would largely be the city attorney's office assisting me in the process of doing that. We don't have any dedicated policy staff per se. We'd have to pull investigators off of some of their work, for example. So I don't have a time frame for you. I just know that I think it will be certainly doable for us to make a commitment to bringing back something in May to start the conversation about potential ballot measure. But in terms of the larger issues, I guess I would like some time to try and sketch that out under both scenarios, if with the staff that we have and with potentially staff that we may have after July 1st.
Thank you.
Do you have any suggestions as to if we were going to convene some kind of a all-day or half-a-day forum to get input from the experts in the field and from the public at large as to things that they think our overall agenda should be, how we would go about doing that?
Some initial thoughts are certainly we have a strong group of outside organizations that are assuming we're focusing on campaign finance related issues primarily, and various issues. The Campaign Legal Center in Washington, D.C. has been very interested in supporting local jurisdictions and coming in with their expertise, talking about a variety of issues. I think through our colleagues in the Council on Governmental Ethics Laws, we could reach out to bring in some voices across the spectrum. I think it's also would be helpful to have practitioners. What do we know? What can we learn from other jurisdictions who have been challenged with some of the similar issues that we have? Perhaps some of the folks from the state FPPC could come in as well. But I would envision a day, if we did this, of having some defined topics and some defined issues to try and get in folks' hands beforehand, and then also have some working sessions to talk with both practitioners, those regulated by the laws, public interest groups, others, and have a real sort of working dialogue. Perhaps by the end of the day, a series of goals or mandates to explore further in terms of a specific policy agenda. It's an ambitious schedule, clearly, to have something like that. It takes resources to do it. Also would take logistics and money to know how we can pull it off and where we can pull it off. But I think, we could, if that's a commission priority, we can sort of, shake the trees in our colleagues to see how we could do it most effectively.
That was the question I was going to ask, is that if we did something like that, it presently isn't in our budget, is it?
No, I would imagine we could do it a low budget on the one hand. If there might be a room in the city or an auditorium at the library that we could use. I think the question of if we are able to have organizations send their members here, or if we can, through our remaining travel funds or the travel funds we have for next year, buy somebody a cheap ticket. We'd have to explore those options. You can't do it with no money.
Maybe we could find some worthy donor who's interested in good government, who might help fund something of that nature.
Yeah, certainly the department can take gifts, but we would need to be careful about where they're coming from. But that's also, again, we can put together sort of an overview of what that might look like and what the costs would be, and put some thinking together about what that might take to make it happen for a day, and bring that back to you and with more information and logistics. You can also partner with local universities is another, of course, option. Local law schools or local universities often have a strong interest in supporting this kind of work.
So Executive Director Pelham, it seems that we could do two things then in the month of May, which is we could do an investigation and see where we could do a low-cost, half-day, full-day conference, and then possibly set up one or two interested person meetings along the way. I think it's really important, and I think there were some lessons learned through Prop C where we can engage the public more sooner, and in a more comprehensive and ongoing way. I think when we head down this road, there are lots of issues that are going to come up, and I think ultimately we would want to be prepared, as you had highlighted, that we would want to walk in with a series of critical issues, and those critical issues then ultimately represent the fullness of all interested parties, and then be prepared to see if we can tackle in that day those critical issues and come up with a series of recommendations that would lead into some proposed legislation that we could put forward. But we would, to our greatest degree, seek for as much consensus as possible, and that would seem to me to be a way in which we could do that.
Commissioner Keene? Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up on Commissioner Andrews' very good observation relating to the lessons learned from Prop C, and as many interested persons meetings and other types of input that we could have would be to the good. Since we've been talking, and I would assume that based upon our discussion, that we would have on our agenda at the next meeting the opportunity to vote for the proposed ballot measure, would it be possible for us to set up some interested persons meeting in anticipation of that May meeting within the next few weeks, telling the public that this is something that we will be taking up and we'll be likely voting at it at the May meeting. We may not, since we have until July to put it on the ballot, but if we had it on the ballot, if we had it on the agenda to vote to put it on the ballot in May, and it appeared to be clear sailing, and we did it then, we could do it. If not, we could then go into the next, put it over to the next month, hold more interested persons meetings, have more types of factual findings that the chair suggested, and the concerns that I also had, that Deputy City Attorney Chen voiced, that I also share, having seen some of the problems that occurred with Prop C, which was a great measure on our part, but we were doing it for the first time, and we were sort of doing a lot of things as we went along. We've learned from that. Why don't we have some interested persons meetings on placing this ballot measure on the agenda before the May meeting? And then we'll have that information for us when we come back here in May.
I think we could probably schedule two. I think we'd need a bit of probably a couple days to get the notice out. We have obviously information from the organizations, but we could solicit public comment at a couple of meetings. We can identify that.
Great.
Any other call for public comments?
Mr. Chair, there is one other action aspect that I see in regard to this at page 3, where in regard to Senate Bill 1107, where we have the statement that the staff was recently contacted by California Common Cause with a request for the Commission to join in supporting SB 1107, a state bill that would, among other things, remove all existing restrictions in state law that bans local jurisdictions, us general cities, from establishing public campaign finance systems if they desired to do so. This isn't anything that we'd be adopting. We would just be going on record with Common Cause that we agree with them that this is something that the state should do in SB 1107. It takes a restriction off the cities in regard to our jurisdiction for doing things relating to campaign.
Not us. It's other cities.
Other cities as well. Let's help out some other cities.
Right.
And to the extent that we have, to the extent that it may affect us, I think we should back. This commission should go on record backing SB 1107. I so move.
Second? Second. I guess the only question is, I'm in favor of our going on record of backing it, but it's clear that it's legislation that does not impact San Francisco. All you're doing is sending a message or saying we think all the cities should be free to set their campaign limitations and restrictions, just as San Francisco does. If that's clear that what we're doing is and if it's consistent, but as I understand, your inquiry was that there is mayors and board of supervisors committees, and the desire is that we speak with one voice. So maybe what your motion should be that we advise the other city committees that are responsible for communicating the view of San Francisco on state legislation, that we are urging them to support it.
I'd adopt that as a friendly amendment. But in addition, I think since we do have a direct request by California Common Cause, a very worthy organization in these areas, who've expressed their desire to have us as a commission, as the San Francisco Ethics Commission, to specifically support SB 1107. So they see some value in regard to having us on their list of endorsers or whatever, and I think we should accommodate them on that. And in addition to advising the other city departments that may have direct jurisdiction in regard to that, I think we should go on record in supporting the measure.
So I have a question for Deputy City Attorney Shen. Are there any restrictions or limitations on the Commission taking such action, as Commissioner Keene suggests?
So as Leanne alluded to, there is a city body, the State Legislation Committee, that coordinates the city's position on pending state matters. Obviously, the idea of this committee is that when the city does speak on pending legislation, it speaks with one voice, and one agency is not at odds with another. I imagine as a practical matter, there wouldn't be any city agency, frankly, that would be opposed to SB 1107. I imagine the committee would be very receptive to it, but there is this process by which, again, the city ensures that, to the extent the city does weigh in or any city agency weighs in on state legislation, it does so in a consistent way. Everyone knows about it. This committee has public meetings where people have a chance to speak about it as well. That uniformity is, I think, the purpose of that committee. So I'm not sure the timing of SB 1107, how urgent it is. Obviously, that's a factor you guys can take into
We have someone here from Common Cause who could Mr. Chair, who might advise us.
Helen Greco, California Common Cause. I first want to say thank you very much for your impassioned comments. And there are only a handful of cities that are charter cities that can now make their own decisions about public financing. And so this is a move to lift the ban. It changes nothing in San Francisco. And yes, it is sort of a moral appeal to say we need to make decisions about how campaign finance is run, and we shouldn't be banned from doing that as municipalities. As far as timing on the bill, it has a couple more committees to go through, so we still are active in moving through the process. But I would ask that the sooner we get your support, the better. And I can have Gavin, who is our good government staffer, send information to Leanne about exactly what's going on in the committees. I'm a former San Francisco resident and a Northern California organizer, so I can connect Gavin up as he's been communicating with Leon and give you the exact committees that it's going through and how. But as I always say, the sooner you can give us your support, the better. And I appreciate the fact that there's a body that makes these official endorsements. But I also want to say that as the Ethics Commission, this is your purview, this issue of campaign finance and what's going on, I think your voice is very much needed in this battle to change the way our elections are run in the state and in the country. Thank you.
And let me ask you a question. Have you made this same request of the Board of Supervisors and the mayor?
Not of the mayor, no. We've gone to all the ethics commissions in California that have public financing enacted and asked them to join us so that we can lift this ban so it's available to everyone.
But that you've gone to our Board of Supervisors.
As I understand right now, it was presented to your commission first, so you're sort of the doorway in. Thank you.
Just following up on that, Mr. Chair, I think that one of the things that was just identified is that we would be the body that would have the most knowledge, the most purview relating to this. So whatever action the city would take, our voice should be persuasive. So I think in that sense, it doesn't appear from anything that we're stepping on anybody's toes in terms of the city's protocol or the city speaking as one voice, that they'd actually be looking to us for some input on this, because this is what we do. So I would urge the motion.
Before I call for a vote on it, I call for public comment limited just to Commissioner Keene's motion, not to the overall topic, just to Commissioner Keene's motion.
I'm Bob Planthold. I support it. I'm a veteran of the city's state legislation committee, and I want to clarify the process issue you're getting involved in. The state legislation committee is supposedly to consider legislation that affects San Francisco, but it also instructs the lobbyist on the official city position. There have been occasions where city commissions on their own took a position on state legislation. They don't go to the state legislation committee. It's just the XYZ commission supports or opposes something. So you could do that. If you go to the state legislation committee, staff would have to come up with some analysis and present. They don't have staff of their own, so you've got to find a way to get staff to do something for SB 1107. Keep that in mind. They meet the second Wednesday of the month. In addition, the way politics works in Sacramento, even if a bill does not get out by the time the budget is recommended, it still can be brought back to life in August. I'm not suggesting delay. I'm suggesting that even if you don't hear good news about SB 1107, it still could be dormant and resuscitated. So the idea of moving ahead to support it is worthwhile. At the same time, Commissioner and Ms. Pelham, all of you folks, I've got a lot of experience with the State Legislation Committee and up in Sacramento, so that give me a call and I'll tell you more details about how to get on the agenda for the State Legislation Committee. But if they fail to support it, you got to worry what effect that would have on the bill if the city says, nah, we're not going to go for that. Whereas you could now on your own say something and leave it at that. Keep that in mind, but I hope you do this. And I also want to say, yes, move ahead. Thank you.
David Pilpel again, speaking as an individual. On this question of SB 1107 and the State Legislation Committee, Bob's not the only one who's been to those meetings. I, too, have. They had a meeting scheduled for last week that was canceled, so their next regular meeting would be Wednesday, May 11th. I forget the code section. It may be Admin Code 7.3, somewhere in there. But it lays out what the process is for the city taking a position on state legislation, and it either explicitly or implicitly suggests that officers of the city, boards and commissions, can't take positions on their own, that the only two ways that the city takes positions on legislation are either through that body, or if they're not meeting, the Board of Supervisors can, by, I think, resolution, take a position on state legislation. So I would urge that you do take the amendment and state that this commission urges the State Legislation Committee, to support SB 1107, and that you not on your own support it. I think that that's actually beyond the powers and duties of this commission. The way they work, each bill is either presented by the department, and there's a little form and a write-up. It's on their website at sfgov.org/SLC, and that'll help explain. The department staff usually just puts that together as a one-pager with what it does, who would be affected, why the city should take a position, et cetera. And then things usually just get routinely supported there as departments make requests. Other commissions that have a larger legislative agenda for the year, the MTA and the PUC in particular, bring a legislative agenda to their board or commission at the beginning of the year and either talk about specific bills or specific ideas that they want to support or oppose in Sacramento. And so that's something that you might consider doing next year if we get the policy staff, if there are particular bills or ideas that we want to support or oppose there. But I hope that helps explain that process a little bit. So I do support taking this action, but with that particular phraseology that it would urge another city body to take that action. And I'll comment later on the rest of the policy agenda. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comment on this specific motion?
Charlie Marsteller again. Just for the record, I'm former chair of Common Cause in San Francisco and also coordinator for many years back in the 90s through 2000. I did want to say that for SB 111 or 1107, I would think that you certainly should feel that you have the right to say whatever you want. I view you more as a city agency and not as a department. And I think the voters made that clear in your charter. So I think you can certainly speak on something as simple as this, because you're, in a sense, the grand old man of public financing in California. So I'm sure that the committees in the Senate and the Assembly would be interested in hearing how public financing has worked in San Francisco. And we have SHISTA as a great asset. We have these current reports. They're issued every year. So we could put together a very nice presentation for the committee pretty quickly and simply, I think, to show that this is not a threat to the state and that this should work very well. I think the times are moving in this direction with the flow of money flooding the state and all politics nationally. So I would recommend you just simply send a report of your experience with PF to give the committee insight as to how this would work in the local level.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Johnson, and I think that there does need an emergency coordinator with the FDNC, because some people can't talk to you, and some people, just refuse to know who they are. So, because of, the purpose of not being at their meeting and That was not on purpose. I went down there and I did see something at school about legislation. And I was, put in a situation where it did not, throw. Like sometimes when things happen in the world and it does not, get put on a monitor. And this is a very serious emergency consequences. That, I don't want nobody to try to kill herself. I don't want nobody to try to put themselves down or any kind of other stupid reactions. Because I've been meeting a lot of that. And I don't think that the world has even made it. If you get to common sense, it wasn't. Because everything grows, is normal, and every human being is normal. If they can get sick, yeah, but that because, it's not a program that means to stay on a situation. Not a policy on it, and nobody even helps because of they shouldn't because of election. But I have no way of getting the car because it's been spinning, and I have been practicing, and I still get the same answer at the police department. I get tired of that too. And there's something to that. Because
Thank you.
Commissioners Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. It's amazing how many times in the years I've been coming to the Ethics Commission and other commissions that something that is a fairly straightforward proposition is made and seconded, and then all of a sudden the dissembling and the equivocation starts. Oh, well, maybe we're stepping on somebody's toes, or maybe we haven't got this, or maybe we haven't got that. Who doesn't want to have the ability to control the money that is running our politics now? Yes, do we have to be sure we follow the law and the Citizens United decisions and all that kind of stuff? Of course. But what you're talking about here is a simple statement that this body, which is primarily responsible for the issue in this city, stands out and says, we believe, from our experience, and it is extensive, that other cities in this state should be allowed, if they so choose, to regulate the political contributions going to their elections. That's all it's saying. It's not raising or razzing the Bastille or anything. It's not like we're trying to do some illegal, immoral act. It's simply a statement saying that the Ethics Commission believes that the state legislature should allow cities to regulate public finance. Nothing more. And yet I keep hearing this, well, maybe this, maybe that, or whatever. Just vote for it. Just say, we are the people in this city who do it. Our experience tells us that it serves a purpose, and if it serves a purpose for us, then it would serve the same purpose for any other community. And so, state legislature, our idea is let it happen. Don't sit and worry about whether somebody ran it by the mayor or the city attorney or, the pixies underneath the tree. Just take an action, show some chutzpah.
Thank you. I will call the question, but I guess let's clarify exactly what the motion is so that we know what we're voting on.
The motion is that we support California Common Cause with respect to its support of SB 1107, and that we also adopt the chair's language that in doing that, we would call upon whatever germane city agencies or department or officials that are involved in formally offering that kind of recommendation to the legislature to go ahead and back the measure.
Second. I will call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion is carried. We'll now go to public comment on the discussion that we had on item number 4.
Ready? Okay. David Pilpel again, speaking as an individual. There were a lot of items that you talked about in terms of the policy agenda. Let me just sort of dance around different issues. This commission used to have, for a time, a retreat. I think it was on a Saturday in the basement. I recall that Mike Garcia, when he was the chair, organized it. It's been a number of years since that happened. Maybe some kind of a combination retreat and policy summit would work. I'm frankly a little less interested in the state and national context, although maybe that would be helpful. I'm more interested in what we do locally, the things that work, the things that don't work as well, and where we should focus. But something around that idea, either in City Hall or elsewhere, half day or a full day, could be a weekend, doesn't have to be. That would be interesting. In terms of a potential ballot measure, the language that's here clearly would restrict and burden some of the rights of lobbyists. And so I think not just the interested persons meeting, but additional outreach to lobbyists and their concerns should happen. I think from my takeaway from last year is that there was really a rush to put Prop C on the ballot, and that it was not, I mean, Chair Rennie did a fine job of explaining it once it was placed, but I think that there was really a rush to get it on the ballot. And I think this year certainly more time should be taken before a measure is put on the ballot, and the known consequences and the unknown consequences and the other issues should be more carefully thought through so that we're not, after the fact, trying to fix things. In terms of the rest of the items on the list of policy topics, I think those should be prioritized a little more. I personally favor fixing and tweaking existing rules and procedures before we take on new things to try to regulate or change. I think in particular we talked a lot about enforcement policies and regulations. I think that would, for me, would be a high priority to look at fixing. And some of these other limits and filings, permit consultants already exist, and maybe reviewing those regulations and how they work. That all makes sense before we extend further regulations and look at some of these other issues. But I do think that a more prioritized list of all of these various ideas, both with additional staff if the budget allows, or without staff, would be helpful, so that we can see if we do have staff, we can do these things in the next few months. If we don't, then we'll have fewer things and it'll take longer. Also, the idea that the budget would give you staff July 1, normally the budget is adopted toward mid-July or the end of July, but usually new positions don't start until October, so they're usually only 9-month positions, so we may not have new people for a while. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Morgan Aitken-Young with Represent Us San Francisco. Thank you all for your time and for your positivity around our proposal. Just to give you guys a little bit of context, we're a local group. We're nonpartisan. We're committed to anti-corruption, transparency, and accountability in government. I want to be respectful of your time, and thank you for considering this proposal in regards to limits on lobbyists. We've found that when we explain this to your average San Franciscan and explain what's legal, they're completely perplexed as to the fact that it's legal. So I think that this is something that once it's brought to public attention, people are very concerned that it's happening. So I really support the movement for a conference or a summit of some sort. I know our whole group agrees that it's a big picture thing, and though these are important parts of it, that the big picture is really critical. So I'd love to help you guys plan that if you need help and resources. So that was really exciting to hear that proposed tonight. So we're taking action to restore a government that represents and works for the people, not just lobbyists or special interests. We want to strengthen the voice of the San Francisco voter and eliminate any perception of political bribery, and we believe that this ballot initiative would be the first step. So we are putting our hopes in all of you to bring this proposal to the ballot in November. Thank you for your time.
Hello, Commissioners. Again, Charlie Marsteller. I just wanted to say, yes, we have had strategic planning meetings. That's what we called them. On Saturday mornings, there would be like a light breakfast opportunity and coffee, particularly. And that would wake us up, and we would talk about the agendas for the upcoming year. I like the concept of a greater conference for policy development, but I see those as a two-step process because we really have one series or process now right on our agenda, and that is what we're going to be doing maybe as close as the November ballot. So I would suggest that you might want to do a hybrid approach, work on the strategic planning conference for the long term, where you invite international or national representatives to come in. You might be able to pull both. And right now then focus on what you're planning to do for the balance of the year and what's doable. I've broken these down to easy to do in-house, harder to do in-house, requires a vote by the board and requires a vote by the people. And then I took various concepts that a number of us have been talking about and tried to plug them in, and I saw that that's a good way to go. We might want to do an interested persons meeting maybe as a warm-up and then do our Saturday meeting with the Commission to discuss what that agenda should look like for the immediate term of the balance of 2016. But I think that that's what I would recommend you would do. Break it into two parts.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Gregory Bryan, and I just want to say that I'm also with Represent Us, and I support the ballot measure, and I just wanted to stand by Morgan in her statements on what she presented to the Ethics Commission. And also want to applaud you for going forward with getting the initiative on and the steps that you've talked about today, as far as like getting the public all involved in a forum and some type of initiative to involve the whole public in the policy matters going forward. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Zach. I'm also with Represent Us. Just wanted to thank you guys for considering it during this meeting, and I want to thank Commissioner Keene for vigorously supporting it in advance, and also Commissioner Andrews for suggesting that we apply the learnings from Proposition C to this process, because I think that's very important. So also want to add my name in support of what Morgan said, and thank you.
Thank you.
Elena Schmidt with Friends of Ethics. Also agree with having stakeholder meetings, public meetings, absolutely important, and that moving forward with Represent Us is important and that we should do it as quickly as we can. I would ask that as staff looks at it, they look at whether there is a definition of bundling, that everybody kind of assumes what that means, but I want to make sure that in fact that's there. You've heard a lot of other things. I don't want to repeat stuff. One of the issues that had come up during the last meeting, which was discussed as a policy issue, I did not see listed, and that was whether the any public officer that was being investigated should automatically be audited. And I believe that Ms. Pelham said we should have a policy on that first, and so I would ask that that get added to the list. I think that you also need to talk a little bit about priorities and how you're going to call the priorities. What are the things that are important to the Commission in terms of how you're going to be able to make cuts? Because when you have your stakeholder meeting, you're going to get a lot of ideas on what you all should be doing. So it's like making sure that we're all very clear and understanding what your priorities are going to be able to make the cuts. And I think you have heard everything else. Thank you very much.
I'm Bob Plantold. I wanted to add my name and voice in support of working to put the ballot measure recommended in text, recommended by Represent Us, on the ballot. So with that, you're talking now about a couple of interested persons meetings. You also separately had the concept of maybe a summit. You're wondering about space, and there's also the question of money. State legislators can get use of the basement auditorium and breakout session rooms in the basement of the Hiram Johnson building diagonally across from City Hall, and they can get it free. Sometimes weekends, that's harder, but maybe weekdays. So you could have a multiplicity of topics, such as each of these on page 2, you might have a separate breakout room if you wanted to be that extravagant in your energy, but certainly a summit could accommodate the Represent Us concepts and some of these in here. Some of these topics have already been in the news. The additional gifts of travel reporting, the fact that some e-filing requirements of Form 700, there's no common database. Some are filed here, some are filed there. You're never sure where to go to find out all this information. Topics you can consider, but you got a place to get free meeting space. And that's going to be important when you don't have staff. I also want to suggest that since the mayor's budget ought to be out soon in May, by the time of your next meeting, you'll know what the mayor's planning for ethics, and therefore how that'll affect your planning any summit, how you're going to handle any interested persons meeting, and so forth. I also want to refer you to what I would call massive database of agencies that did endorsements, of agencies that had campaign FPPC ID numbers. One person I know compiled everything from city planning, from what was with the elections department, and that I think was passed to you folks last fall. It's worth considering using that when you're talking about A, a summit, B, when you talk about revisiting various provisions of Prop J. So here I want to make a point. You're talking too much inside baseball. When the public sees Prop J, how many different elections is there a Prop J? You don't state the year. You ought to be more informative to the public so the public doesn't have to go through successive multiple election filings to find out what Prop J are they talking about. Any number of these other topics, similarly, try to be more specific so the public can quickly find out what you're considering revising, amending, recommending, dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. First, I'd like to say that I personally appreciate all of the time and the energy that the members of the public who have spoken tonight and have been here tonight have put into making this effort move forward. I really am a firm believer that the only way the government is responsible to the citizens or if the citizens hold it responsible. I'd like to secondly go back to the first speaker, Mr. Pilpel, and say that I agree with him that the one thing that I think has to be a top priority for you is enforcement. You can rearrange the rules and rewrite the rules and all this other stuff, but unless you enforce the rules, it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. The city slowly sinks into this pay-for-play situation, and everybody says, oh, let's rewrite the rules. But the bottom line is, if the rules aren't enforced, if they don't have some teeth, they're meaningless. And all of that effort was for naught. The civil grand jury talking about the Ethics Commission being a toothless watchdog or a sleeping watchdog, whatever it was, I think really aimed directly at that. I'm going to give you a personal example, and I know you don't want to hear it, but it's going to be anyway. City librarian Luis Herrera was accepting $5,000 a year from the group called the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library, a group that he had fiduciary responsibility toward in keeping oversight as they were raising money in the name of city government. He filed statements of economic interest each and every year for 3 years, stating he got nothing. We tried to approach this Ethics Commission with that, and Mr. St. Croix found 106 objections as to why you couldn't deal with it, and we ended up having to go to the FPPC in Sacramento, who found the city librarian guilty of perjury because he signed statements of economic interest saying he got nothing from this group when he was getting thousands of dollars. And I'll tell you an additional thing that has come out since then. It has been more than 40 months since this group has appeared before the Library Commission, and more than $10,000 raised in the name of this city and the name of its public library has gone through their hands, and there is nobody in city government who has one note to show where that money went. The best I can figure out from what the city supervisors approve each year is they are giving about 6 cents out of $1 to the library, which puts them right in the same range as a lot of these ones you're hearing being federally indicted and state government indicted as spending all the money they raise on raising the money. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, what the library gets for the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library is the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library. If the rules aren't enforced, rewriting them is meaningless.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Johnson. I think that I had already said that a lot of these police officers and the rules on this is that all the community has to, obey by that, or I'm going to go and make sure that they do. Even in court, any kind of situation that's going to be put in this matter, and I'm also going to put a ordinary who I'm going to, put on in case anything happens in these events that we have, and that I want to also demand you make sure I get there on the tennis course, because I asked you over and over again, like you just going to let the world just disappear because you won't contact me. I am sick and tired of this. You know that the world is going down. Now, come on. Stop this bullshit of the devil. Stop this crazy, I don't know stuff. Because you're going to go down if you don't. And I'm going to make sure that the policy and this rearrangement for community meetings and how to write out the transfer service, how to deliver to the library, to treat with the public, and how to, precisely make, well, this is how it should do it. To, put the library open up until 7 o'clock. That's a good time. And the commissioners here, I think that they're on the market and that they should be, and also police department. I want you all to be aware of what's going to happen, and I'm visionary that we have to stand on far and south side, like I told the police department already, in this same coordinate where we're doing as well. Because this will make sure that we're secure. All possibilities, which I have already, got one of the discriminators on this.
I see no further public comment on agenda item number 4. And I don't believe there was any decision that we had to make, but I think you have, based on the comments of the commissioners, understand some direction, and that in May, in addition to the legislation, you'll come with some specific recommendations about moving forward on the policy issues, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. All right, let's turn to item number 5, which is the status report on the Ethics Commission proposed budget.
Item number 5 is here to give you a bit more background and information on the status of the Commission's budget request for FY 2017 and FY 2018. We've had a couple of conversations with the Mayor's budget team, and we're continuing to provide them information in support of our request. I wanted to highlight for you some of the information that we have provided to them. In the attachments to your item 5 include the request that we submitted originally in February to the Mayor's office, just for reference. It also includes some of the sample indicators of performance that we would envision using for any new resources that were provided to the Commission as part of our budget. We also, moving to attachment 2, wanted to give you a copy of the submissions that we made for the Mayor's Senior Fellows program. This is a program where the Mayor's Senior Fellows are embedded in a department each year. It's a competitive process, and they work on very high-level strategic projects for various departments for a time frame of about 10 to 12 months. They come in with extensive experience in various fields. So each department could submit 3 applications, and so we submitted our 3 applications. We're expecting to hear probably in the next several weeks about where senior fellows may be housed in the coming year. But just to give you a sense of the kinds of projects we looked at, those are here for your information as well. We also had some good news this month. We submitted an e-filing conversion project to the Committee on Information Technology. And earlier this month, we did Stephen Massey, Information Technology Officer, and I did a brief presentation to the Subcommittee on Budget and Performance, who later voted to recommend that project be fully funded to the larger COIT committee. And so that's something that I believe is still underway, but that was very good news that they endorsed the project. That would be something that would be funded through COIT, not through the general fund, but that was very good news. Our presentation, the slide of the deck of slides that we provided, are included here for your information. It's expected to be a roughly 5-year project that would ensure all of our filing requirements and public disclosure statements we currently have become part of an electronic system, so that it would ease compliance burdens for those who have filing requirements. It would also significantly ease the staff burden because it would move into an electronic environment rather than paper, and provide much more information to the public as well in terms of open data for them to be able to look at the data themselves and make sense of it. So that was very good news. We'll have more on that as the COIT committee itself gets together and finalizes its recommendations. And then lastly, part of what we gave to the Mayor's office in support of our request, we had committed as part of our blueprint for accountability in February to the Mayor's office that we would provide a much fuller list of potential key performance indicators that we would hold ourselves accountable to should we get the positions that we've asked for. And so in attachment 4, there's information about each of the positions we've requested, what they would do, what the rationale is, what would happen with the position, what would happen without the position, and then importantly, a very detailed list, I think, of the types of key performance indicators that would be something we would hold ourselves to in terms of assessing whether or not we're making progress on the goals that we have with those positions. So I wanted to provide that to you as a background information. I did want to provide to you one other item that's on the public table as well. This is to supplement your discussion. On Friday, we met with the Mayor's Office of Budget folks and provided them with some workload caseload information as a snapshot of where we are at the present time. And we took a look at the current enforcement program caseload, because we also believe it's important to be transparent, to hold ourselves accountable for improvements in this area. One of the things that we looked at was, of the 24 open formal complaints, how old they are, and what kind of a backlog we have. And so that information is shown on the chart. It's the blue colored one-page sheet. So on average, when you look at the 24 open cases that are formal complaints, on average, the average age is 8 months. Those are cases that are under investigation presently. When you look at the additional, and that's 24 matters, when you look at the number of matters that are under preliminary review that come in the door that we've initiated to look to see if there is a formal complaint that should be logged and a formal investigation beginning, there are 43 of those matters that are still under review. The oldest of them is between 13, and we have one that's between 13 and 15 months, one that's about a year old. So this information, I think, is important to recognize and be transparent about. It's a benchmark that we need to use to demonstrate progress going forward. And this is something that the investigative staff, the enforcement staff, and I are looking at regularly to try and get through these. But it also says that when you have, in my judgment, when you have 67 matters that are open, and currently with the resources that we have, the equivalent of one full-time investigator, one FTE, full-time equivalency, given that we have historically demanded other work priorities of our investigators as well. This is, again, something that we've been talking about that we know we need to right-size in the coming year, certainly, to make sure that we can make strides in winnowing down both the number that are pending, how long it takes to resolve them, as well as those matters that are under preliminary review. So I wanted to just highlight, because that's something we shared with the mayor's office on Friday as an indication of where we are and where we know we need to move from.
In your conversations with the mayor's office, have you gotten any indication that they are looking favorably or wanting us to chip and cut or something?
I think yes and yes. There have been indications that they do seriously seem to want to support the Commission's priorities. At the same time, we understand that from these conversations, as I'm sure they're sharing with all departments, that it's a difficult time for the city, that there are increasing pension costs and increasing demands for city resources that all departments apparently are going to be expected to share in. That said, we're still trying to make the most judicious use of our time in those conversations. We're trying to be as upfront as we can about the information that we have, and to be really creative about the ways that we could go about making improvements in our work, whether it's through innovation, or whether it's using applying for senior fellows. Whatever we can do to try and increase the effectiveness of our operations is really, really key. So I think they're looking for cuts in terms of our request. I think we've moved away from cutting us. I think there clearly seems to be some support through the QUITE process for our projects, but we won't know. We won't know the bottom line until further conversations and until the next several weeks.
Would it be helpful to you to have the Commission express some views as to how important they believe it is that the full budget be adopted, particularly in the enforcement side and the policy side?
I think if the Commission has a view on that, it's always very important to help ensure that that's a perspective that we can share. I think my own perspective is I think that would be helpful. There will always be a sense of priorities that people are looking for. It's very hard for me to say one area is more important than another, because I truly believe these all need to be done to build our capacity.
Any of the commissioners have any comments? Commissioner Keene?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Very excellent presentation on the budget. A couple of things to keep in perspective in regard to the mayor's office looking at the budget of this commission, and not just agreeing to raise the necessary amounts that are needed to do the job, but the whole ludicrous idea of cutting is that prior to Ms. Pelham, for an ungodly number of years, the executive director of this commission never asked for one dime in increase over the course of all of the years that the predecessor was here. As a result of which, this commission is completely stagnated for resources. Now we have Ms. Pelham just coming out and making an honest assessment of what's necessary to address some of these pending matters and to go forward with some of the things that we'd like to in order to address ethical concerns in San Francisco. If the mayor and the Board of Supervisors were to not go along with this or were to cut it, that would be not just the height of arrogance and irresponsibility on the part of city government, but it would be an indication of sanctioning corruption. One of the things that's going on now is the other day in the newspaper, there was an article about the Board of Supervisors talking about appointing a public advocate position and essentially putting some sort of supernumerary in that position to do the tasks that should be done by this ethics commission and to add some layer of things to the city bureaucracy, totally unnecessary, that this commission could and should be doing. The city, the mayor, is under all sorts of attack right now relating to allegations of corruption in the inner city family, indictments, other grand jury investigations, the district attorney's investigations. The mayor has unequivocally claimed that he is in favor of doing everything that there is to ferret out corruption and to make sure that the city operates under ethical standards and that he is in no way tarnished by the things that we've seen in the last couple of years. This is one way Mayor Ed Lee, one very good way Mayor Ed Lee can put his money where his mouth is in terms of allowing the one agency that does do the ethical oversight of this commission, of this city, to do its job. To not do it would be a clear indication to the city and county of San Francisco and to the people of the city and county of San Francisco that things are not on the up and up and that there's a fear of looking into many of the shady dealings that are clearly going on in this city. So I hope that the mayor and the Board of Supervisors would go ahead and do the right thing in terms of this modest budget to meet these needs to finance it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chair Rennie. Ms. Pelham, so I was looking through here, and I know you know this is probably on the top of your mind. There are four FTE that are just referenced right here. Did we decide that? Did you prioritize? Are these listed as a priority for you when we go from senior policy analyst, information systems, and then an investigative analyst?
Can you reference which document you're looking at?
I'm looking at, so it's attachment 4, right? So you put
attachment 4.
Yeah, attachment 4. Was there any rationale you put to any of those?
Not in the ordering of how they appear there. No, but if you look back at the February 22nd, our blueprint for accountability, we first talk about the priorities in terms of the e-filing conversion project, both the project development and then the staffing that is necessary in order to make that project happen. The next area is effective enforcement and investigations. And that's where we've asked for the balance of funds for one current position we have authorized, but for which we've not had sufficient funding because of attrition savings that has been essentially swept. And then one new investigative position. And then we have the 2 policy positions listed third and some other realignments in-house listed fourth. And I have said, I think I've shared with you before, as well as with the mayor's budget office, it's hard to prioritize. I mean, it's hard for me to say when you're standing on that head of the pin, which falls on which side of that. Because until and unless we have policy people in the office, we will not be able to remove other programmatic responsibilities for our investigative staff, which is going to keep us held back on the investigative side. with 67 open matters, we can't afford to have one FTE doing investigations. And that's only reacting to the ones we currently have. As we all know, in order to be a truly effective agency, we need to be able to do that kind of proactive work and looking at data that we have in our own shop. So I think they're very closely related. Certainly we can't move off without having some policy staff to do all the kinds of things we've been talking about. But we're never going to be an effective an enforcement agency as we know that we need to be per our charter mandate until and unless we have additional investigative resources as well.
These are difficult decisions because it's going to come back, most likely come back with some level of funding that will not necessarily meet the full need of the commission, and we will need to make a really good decision on prioritizing these resources. So.
I think the one thing two things I would say is that it is important to try and provide as much coverage as we can reasonably across all of these areas. We cannot leave any area of our operations untouched. I think the second thing is that there's also a difference between having the authority for positions and having positions with that we have authority for being funded. So, it's really critically important to say that when we are going to have a position authorized, that it in fact have the funding to make it happen in practice.
To support it. Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, Executive Director Pelham, there's currently an open position for the Deputy Executive Director. Can you speak to that role as well, and whether bringing that person on, filling that role, hopefully sometime in the summer, if that can help impact the caseload and the workload of the Commission?
I think it will be yet one more set of hands on deck to do the existing work. They won't be doing day-to-day investigative work. They would be, this is filling an existing position that is an exempt position for which we have authority and we have funding. So my hope is that with the deadline on May 6th, that by midsummer, we will certainly have somebody on board to help be that oversight, provide that oversight certainly to the enforcement program on a day-to-day basis, but also to be kind of a general counsel role, if you will, to support us with policy development. So it will be an extra set of hands, but in and of itself is not going to won't be doing investigative work. So I'm not sure if that answers your
could
question.
Help on the policy side.
Yes.
Motion instructing Executive Director that she should make no compromise with the budget, so that if there's going to be action, it's not going to be because we.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want me to do it?
Board of Supervisors.
I'd certainly make that motion, and I think we had that motion before when we originally gave Ms. Pelham her marching orders with the budget, that the mayor's office came and said, well, identify these proposed savings. And we said, don't identify any proposed savings. Yeah. Don't do it. Just ask for the whole thing and demand the whole thing. And as I recall, we got a unanimous vote at that time out of it because, again, not to belabor it, but it's not just the fact that the former executive director never asked for any additional money. Whenever there was a cut, he just rolled over it and allowed the cut to take place. And there's really no other department, I think, in city government that has allowed itself to be completely castrated through its resources as this department has over the course of the last 10 or 12 years or so. And we have members of the public constantly coming up and saying, by God, I made this complaint, and why hasn't it happened? I made it yesterday. I made it 2 months ago. And we see Ms. Pelham's told us she's got 67 open matters and one full-time investigator. So they lambaste Ms. Pelham. They lambaste us. They lambaste the chair as some evil character. And that's not the case. This commission needs the resources to go forward and do this stuff because there's a lot of things in this town that need to be investigated, and unless we get these resources, we can't do it. So don't identify anything that can be cut. That would be my thing. Just don't. As we already expressed the fact that we wanted you to do that. The commission wants the whole amount, period. The mayor and the board of supervisors aren't going to give it. Let's see what they do, and let's us respond at least with rhetoric if that gets us anywhere.
Commissioners, if I may just interject, the item, and perhaps my apologies if this was a different intent, this was listed as an update and discussion to provide you with information about the item. Certainly, so there isn't something agendized for the Commission's action. If the Commission's consensus is what we're hearing several of the commissioners articulate, certainly that's information that will guide the continuing process. But I apologize if your hope was to take action. We didn't agendize it that way.
I think you've heard the expression from those who were present when the budget was first before us, and I'm sure that our new commissioner agrees.
Yes, I wasn't here for the original budget submission, but I can't emphasize enough the critical importance of having the resources to be able to do the critically important work that is facing us. And we've heard comments from the public about the slow pace of action on complaints, and with a caseload of 67 pending matters, only one full-time person to handle it. That's not realistic, and having 8 months, 11 months pending is going to be the outcome, and that's not serving the people of San Francisco very well. And so anything that we can do, I think, to urge and emphasize our support for this full budget to the mayor and his budget team, I would stand ready to do that.
Any public comment?
Elena Schmidt again. I also want to compliment Ms. Pelham on the report, the budget write-up. It was astounding to read. And the thing that was astounding the most was the fact of what would not be done. So not just what you have on the books now for the 67 open complaints or whatever it was, but it's all the things that would not be done if you didn't get more FTEs. And I would say that you hear a certain segment of the public at every one of your meetings, but the larger public, if I remember correctly, 75% voted very strongly for some good ethics reform for Prop C. So I would suggest that maybe you think about having the commissioners, maybe the chair, do an editorial and talk about what's in front of the budget, what we're asking for, what's important, and how hampered we have been, and that it may be helpful to get some comments back to the supervisors about what they should be voting on. So that's one comment. The other comment real quickly is don't forget that over the time period when we've been talking about how you've been don't have enough auditors and stuff, is I believe the Comptroller's Office has offered some of their services for auditors to help you out on the auditing front. So you should keep that in mind also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Charlie Marsteller again. I wanted to alert you to something years ago when we talked about the horizon where we would eventually be within electronic filing format for virtually all the sectors and divisions of our programs, and then how we could tie that into other city databases. For instance, the purchaser's contracting list of contractors. We discussed the potential for doing auto auditing, which was a subroutine for our filing system that would allow the various divisions to be audited. In a sense, it's beyond facial audit, but it would basically be looking at math, or it may be correlating data with other city databases. And there was a discussion about that, which you might want to raise with the, what was that group? The mayors, or I mean the city's COIT? You call it, okay, like COIT, yeah. Oh, I'm sure they're being clever. In any event, COIT is the group that would know about this concept, and there's probably considerable cost savings and efficiencies with auditing by looking at auto audit. That's one thought. The second is I'm wondering if, since we live in a resource-rich area, if there's any grant money that would be available for any of these new programmatic areas where we could outreach without conflict of interest to an organization that might be willing to grant fund some aspect of our new mission. And that's just a thought.
Thank you.
David Pilpel again, speaking as an individual. First, to Charlie's point, I think now is an excellent time to look at the contracts and the relationship to financial disclosure. The city is replacing its, and Commissioner Keene will remember, its famous system, which has been around for a long time in terms of budget and fiscal controls. The financial system replacement project is ongoing and is supposed to go live next year, July of 2017. And I think there is a component that deals with contracts and relating this to AdPix, which is their system for dealing with that. So anyway, I would encourage you to talk to the Controller's Office, and Jack Reed, I think, is the project director, and look if there's a way that we could get some of that contracting information as relates to the 1.126 forms and other disclosure. But back to the rest of it. This is the first time I've seen a handout like this. I certainly have followed the Commission since nearly the beginning. And I note on the Executive Director's report every month at least the number and summary of pending formal complaints, which is at 24. And as we see, this is the aging of those 24. We haven't seen this kind of an aging report before. But we also have never, in my experience, seen what's sort of the bottom of the iceberg, those things that are in preliminary review. So I have never seen information about the number of matters in preliminary review or the aging of those matters. And this suggests that there's a lot more that's in the early queue that hasn't even gotten to the point of being a formal complaint. I would ask that this information or a version of this be included in the Executive Director's report every month so that we have a better understanding of that timing and aging of complaints and can use that in part as evidence to the Mayor's Office and the Board of Supervisors that we absolutely need that additional investigator so as to reduce this backlog. I mean, it just seems to me that over 12 months in preliminary review is just unacceptable. I don't know what the circumstances were, but it shouldn't take that long to determine facially whether or not there's anything to move forward on. And I suspect that that's a question of resources and priorities and other things. But this also goes to my earlier point about the enforcement process. We had talked about having an intake letter. So as soon as someone files a complaint, they would get some kind of intake letter that said, we got it. It's now in preliminary review. We'll get back to you when we've decided what the next step is. That currently doesn't even happen. So whoever has filed these 43 items that are in preliminary review haven't gotten even anything acknowledging that the Commission has received the complaint and is processing it. That's a glaring omission, and I think we should fix that as soon as possible. I really think these additional resources are needed, and let's see where we end up with the Mayor and the Board on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Johnson, and I will put adjustments for the library and just for City Hall, just for public and health department, and just for you know. But I think adjustments. I would not want to explain to you right now, but it takes too much time. But and they're also attract the enrollment for the voting and enrollment for the traffic in San Francisco and enrollment for the police department is one of the most important ones. Police department. Yeah, and to be study on the court system, you know, yeah, because that's another one. And I'll be on the courtroom with the police department too. So kind of affiliate with this, and get testimonies on some of that. Outsiders and, listing on, some, like the men numbers. So that it's because that's what you do when you're in the police department, in direction how, where the police department stand and, be a chief. That is where you, select on a lot of the outcomings and, the police department, should be, just real strongly on what they said. And also, put organizations where everything will be safe in our, business and everything. It's just, we have, things that nobody in this world it's not it's not an easy thing to do all these things, because I need help with the car. I mean, I can do my license. I already had a license. It got stolen.
Thank you.
Commissioners Ray Hart, Director, San Francisco Open Government. Looking at this list of backlog cases, I have to kind of reassess what happened to me back in November when I went to the Ethics Commission and spoke to two of your investigators, both of whom attempted to discourage me from filing complaints. I think it honestly is something I should consider as to whether or not they were afraid to get even further behind in their caseload, and as a result, the advice that is placed on your website encouraging people who feel they might have a complaint to speak with an investigator is kind of counterproductive. If you go in and the person that you're speaking to is the investigator, and this is the person who is supposed to give a fair evaluation of your complaint, attempts to dissuade you from filing a complaint, I think it raises serious questions as to whether or not when they actually do come to doing an investigation, whether they will do a reasonable job. Now, the previous executive director, Mr. St. Croix, was notorious for dismissing cases out of hand. He was like some Oriental potentate who sat in a back room and made up the rules, and the Ethics Commission just went along with him. So all of these cases would go, and they would drag and drag and drag, and then they would never make it before the Ethics Commission because Mr. St. Croix would find some sort of procedural way of dismissing it. And I have to wonder whether or not that same modus operandi or mindset or whatever you want to call it has not worked its way down through the staff, where they believe, we're really here for show. We're not really here to actually investigate anything, let alone enforce it. We're just here to put on a nice program so that everybody can think that somebody's watching the watchman. You know that expression, who will watch the watchman? Unfortunately, in this city, I found that many of the boards and commissions don't do any sort of a job in any way of providing that kind of oversight. We'll see what happens when the mayor comes back. Basically, what you're asking the mayor to do is give us more resources so we can look into the crap that's going on in your administration. And we have to actually wonder, on common sense terms, how naive we must be to ask the mayor and the Board of Supervisors for more resources to look into the things that they are doing, which are unlawful, like the complaint I filed earlier this evening. I made a lawful request of a city elected official. He knew it was a lawful request, and he simply ignored it. He ignored the complaint, he ignored the findings of the task force, and just failed to respond in any way. And his final response was, we have no responsive documents, something he could have done within the time frames for the immediate disclosure request. I think right now you have to realize that not only the citizens are questioning you, but other agencies in this city
Thank you.
are.
Turn to agenda item number 6, discussion and possible action regarding the Ethics Commission's referral to the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue of Forfeiture concerning Supervisor Mark Farrell. And I first asked for public comment on whether to meet, in closed session.
Mr. Chair, may I first address the agenda? Just the agenda.
Sure.
And because I think it's important that some explanation of the agenda, without getting into the matter that we will discuss in closed session, take place. Just so there's public understanding and also to have some fairness towards you, because there have been some charges relating to you in the past having to do with this which are totally untrue. In order to do that, again, a little history has to be expounded upon. This has to do with Supervisor Mark Farrell taking an illegal $193,000 campaign contribution and laundering it in a way that his campaign manager also had another committee that was operating and spent that $193,000 on hit pieces against Supervisor Farrell's opponent within a short time before the election. The $193,000 came from two very wealthy, socially prominent individuals, Dee Dee Wilsey and Tom Coates, who live in Pacific Heights and, as I understand, are fairly in the same circle as Supervisor Farrell. Essentially, we have in our packet a lot of information, a lot of material that was submitted in rebuttal to what we've been doing relating to this finding of a $193,000 campaign contribution violation by Mr. Sutton, Supervisor Farrell's attorney, which paint Supervisor Farrell as white as the driven snow. I've asked, and we have over there for members of the public, that we also put in the record for tonight the letter of Charles H. Bell relating to what the reality is behind this matter in regard to a number of things, and also what the reality is in regard to the law itself. Supervisor Farrell has never really stood before us and denied this. His lawyer has put forth, after a long period of delay, the statute of limitations as a defense, that the statute of limitations is run. Mr. Bell's letter very forthrightly shows that the statute of limitations has not run, that Mr. Sutton is wrong in terms of his averment. Mr. Sutton also talks about the fact that the FEPC completely exonerates Supervisor Farrell. The findings of the information we have from the FEPC is clearly a stipulation that was put in by Mr. Farrell and Mr. Farrell's people to the effect that there were these two committees, and the one committee put out the hit pieces. But that somehow Supervisor Farrell was not responsible because there was a rogue campaign manager, some little character who's not even worth mentioning, who we're supposed to believe got this $193,000 from these two socially prominent individuals to fund this hit campaign committee. And Supervisor Farrell had nothing to do with it. Even if that were the case, Supervisor Farrell hired that campaign coordinator for his committee, and that guy ran that other committee, did those hit pieces with that $193,000. Under the law, Supervisor Farrell is responsible for that. He violated the campaign contribution rules, and the $193,000 by law must be forfeited to the city. It's back on the agenda. We're going to, and this time I'm not going to object to closed session because it's clear that what we're doing is we're talking about legislation to make sure that that money is collected. There's nothing nefarious going on here, certainly nothing in terms of anything that our chair is doing, in terms of some stupid comments that were made by people, one person in particular, to the effect that he was going to get in some dirty deal with Supervisor Farrell. This is completely above board. With that, after public comment, I'm going to move we go into closed session so we can talk about the litigation.
And just to clarify, if I may, Chair Rennie, as the agenda specifies, it's an opportunity for public comment on all matters pertaining to this item, including whether or not to meet in closed session.
Commissioners Ray Hartz, Director, San Francisco Open Government. I suppose I'm that stupid person, but I find it truly bizarre that this agenda item appears as it does once again without any meaningful description of what action the members of this Ethics Commission might be called upon to take. The executive director may feel that telling the public what this is about, leaving out any reason why this is on the agenda, constitutes a meaningful description, but I do not. And there is currently a hearing coming up on May 4th before the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force that I filed the last time this appeared on the agenda without any explanation as to why it was there. And you spent 40 minutes hashing around and wailing and gnashing of teeth, trying to, what is this about? I don't know what this is about. The public doesn't know what this is about. I believe the lengthy discussion which resulted from its last appearance on the agenda should have made it clear that even members of this commission didn't understand the reason for its appearance. If commission members do not understand the item, it is entirely reasonable that members of the public also lacked a meaningful understanding. As such, the reappearance of this item gives the appearance of a backroom deal. Cloaking it as a discussion with legal counsel does nothing but put a polite fig leaf on the deception. As Chair Rennie said the last time, you are the clients, and there is absolutely nothing that precludes you from having this discussion in the open in front of the public because you are the clients, and you can waive the privilege. And I'm sorry if you take umbrage of the fact that I said, maybe it's a backroom deal or whatever it happens to be, but it's what it looks like. You can call it what you want, but going into the back room to have the discussions in private, out of sight of the public, when you could do it here in front of the public, looks bizarre. And putting it on the agenda in the manner it was done so that the public really doesn't have any idea what you're back there talking about. Are you talking about this money that's owed? Yes, you are. Everybody understands that. But we understood that when you finalized the thing and said he had to pay the money in the first place. But now here we are, once again, you're going in the back room, out of sight of the public. And I'll be honest with you. My real feeling is not that anything dishonest is going on. It's that certain members of this Ethics Commission want to take a stand that they don't want the public to hear about. They want to say, maybe we should give them a break on it, or maybe we shouldn't collect it, or maybe we should do this or shouldn't do that. But they don't want to come out and say it in front of the public, because then the public is going to say, now we see whose side you're on. The bottom line is you can have this discussion in the open. The only people that are keeping you from doing that are yourselves.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Johnson, and just because I'm sick does not mean that years of railroading the USA does not mean that I don't care. Because I do care. I just needed a little more authority from you. Because you never do that. I have to give you authority. As this is Tease and old Farrell, I already put on a piece of paper. So one down here has really done anything for me. And that's a little lady. I think her name is Angela. And more that's up here. But if you want to take this because of some other person which I told you, he don't care about himself. That's why he keeps doing it. He needs to care about himself. Oh, you need to care about yourself. That's why I change it. I am going to change, because this is just totally obnoxious. Not even thinking twice. Come on. I just really want you off there. If you're going to keep doing this because of somebody else, and I will never get to the place I'm supposed to be because of physical and other problems, does not mean that you can't try to help the situation. Thank you.
David Pilpel again, speaking as an individual. The last time this came before your commission, I spoke and opined that it was not properly agendized. I had no idea that Ray Hartz was going to file a complaint. As a result, he did. And so when this came up last time at the Sunshine Task Force, I asked to be recused. It was not heard last month. So when it is heard, I anticipate being recused on the item. I continue to think that this could be better explained. We didn't have at the last meeting, and we still don't have any written procedures from the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue. We only have a selective set of letters back and forth, usually to the city, but not from the city to, from the city to. Some of the letters are included, but I believe that there were other letters that the public has not seen here. It's not at all clear what the process is, either at the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue or what options this commission has in regard to this matter. It does appear over the long term that this was handled in a way that was not the best approach and limits what the city may be able to do at this point. From what I've read, I still believe that the bad actor here was common sense voters, and if the law doesn't currently provide that someone who receives and spends funds in excess of the limit owes that money back to the city as a forfeiture, then the law should so provide. I actually think that the city is going after the wrong actor here. Whatever Mark Farrell did in this regard, my understanding is that he may have benefited from the expenditures, but he did not receive, nor did his committee receive the funds at issue or spend the funds at issue. It was his third-party entity, Common Sense Voters. So I would encourage you to consider in the future in looking at these laws who that forfeiture obligation falls on, whether it's a campaign committee or a third-party independent expenditure committee, whether or not it ends up being independent. Otherwise, I look forward to hearing what happens in closed session, should you choose to hold one. Thanks.
Charlie Marsteller here. I would just spur you on and say do the right thing, whatever that is. But I think we all know what the right thing is. Thank you.
Get a motion to.
So moved.
Seconded. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Before we go in closed session, we'll take a 10-minute break and then go in closed session.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television. SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television. SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
Ethics Commission is back in public session. And the next sub-item is discussion and vote pursuant to the Brown Act Sunshine Ordinance on whether to disclose any action taken or discussion held in closed session regarding anticipated litigation as plaintiff. Is there any discussion or a motion?
Move non-disclosure.
Discussion, any public comment? Hearing no public comment, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. I will simply say that the no action was taken in closed session, and the question of proceeding with the litigation against Supervisor Farrell is going forward. All right, let's turn to item number 7, discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. Any public discussion or any members of the commission have comments?
I had a number of things that I was going to specifically bring up, but fortunately they've already been brought up by Ms. Pelham in her list. And those are the things that I would urge that we take up and recommend to the Board of Supervisors in that they pass a number of those measures. The one thing that I would add is that Larry Bush has been in contact with Paul Ryan, who is a very well-known individual in regard to ethical matters and sort of the maven of it. And Mr. Ryan has volunteered to help us in drafting these measures that we'd recommend to the Board of Supervisors. So I think it would be a good idea to take advantage of them in that regard.
Where do we stand with the question of putting all the 700s on our system?
That's one of the items that's on the list, as indicated. I have a meeting coming up this next week with the Department of Human Resources, and that's one of the items that I want to touch base with them about, is starting the conversation again with the unions through their employee relations office to try and start understanding what the questions were and the issues were and how we can address those to the extent that we can to get those 3,000 odd filers onto our electronic filing system. So it's something that's probably going to take several months at least to get the conversation started from last year.
Because I forget whether it was Mr. Bush or somebody pointed out that Steve Kawa, the mayor's principal assistant, doesn't file a Form 700.
Well, right. No, I think when you look at the designated filer list, I believe that position is designated, but it doesn't file electronically. So we can confirm that. But we have a lot of people who file on paper at the departments, and clearly that's something that this commission appropriately is trying to make happen electronically citywide. So we'll spark those conversations again to try and get that conversation, to try and get the discussion started with the bargaining units.
All right. Turn to the item 9, discussion and possible actions on draft minutes for the Commission's March 28, 2016 regular meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we're at item number 8.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped your Executive Director's report.
The written report is in your materials. I would just highlight a couple of quick things. The Deputy Director position that Commissioner Chu talked about earlier, we extended the deadline for applications to May 6th so that we could take full advantage of a 30-day listing on various websites. So we're looking forward to hopefully just a really terrific group of candidates coming in on that. And also, we have attached for your information on the back sheet just for planning purposes down the road, an update on some of the key programs and operational deadlines that are happening in the routine course of our work for the first part of the fiscal year next year. That will just be something we fold into some of these other policy sequencing work that we do. And then I also just wanted to draw to your attention to an update. There were a couple references this evening to the whistleblower protection ordinance, and my oversight for not including it in the policy agenda, since it was a past policy matter that the Commission recently undertook. I met on Friday with the Chief of Staff to Board of Supervisors President London Breed, Connor Johnston, discussed with the proposal with him. It's been circulated to all of the board members, but talked to him about the Commission's background and how it fit with the civil grand jury report recommendations. He was very interested. He was going to take the matter up with Supervisor Breed, and so hopefully we'll have a bit more information early this week, but I'll follow up with that office to see where it might go in terms of being a sponsor for the legislation moving forward. But there seemed to be a strong interest in that. So we do have a one-page fact sheet that we provided to that office, and we certainly will make it more widely available, the summary of what the Commission's actions were, as well as the regulations that the Commission adopted, so that those can be clear for folks going forward, because those would continue to be applicable even under the proposed ordinance that the Commission has recommended. I think that's it for the update, and happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Executive Director Pelham, I had a quick question on page 3. Under the revenues report, I noticed that receipts as of mid-April for contact lobbyists are up to $102,500 versus a budgeted amount of $37,000. Two questions. One, what's driving that significant increase, and then do you expect that to continue for the balance of the year?
I think that we don't expect that pace to continue for the balance of the year. My sense is that this reflects the beginning of the year when the registrations come in. The registrations terminate at the end of the year. Registrations for contact lobbyists are at the initial part of the year. So as to why it's much greater than our budgeted amount, I think we had a change in the lobbying ordinance a year ago where we're actually capturing more contact lobbying activity. So this is representative of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'll turn to 9, which is the minutes. Public comment on 8. Any public comment on 9? Any corrections or additions by any of the commissioners? If not, any public comment? I'll hear a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are adopted. Item 10 was additional opportunity for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Hearing none. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.